walk around and check some, but I mean, again, this is very specific to your quiz. All that is on your quiz in 2 days, graphing and substitution. That's it. 2 things. So either you can do really well or really badly. If you know how to do those things, you'll do really well. If you don't know how to do those things, you'll do really badly. Oh, I take that back. I lied. There are some 2-step equations and then 1 multi-step equation. So I'll do that for Bellworth on Thursday. I mean, I hope you know how to do 2-step equations. You actually saw that out in the process of doing the substitution. So yeah. All right, so for the first equation, y equals 2x. What is the y-intercept for that one? The number, how do we know the y-intercept? You just said it a little while ago. So in the first equation, 2x, what's the y-intercept? Is that by itself?
Hell no.
No.
So what do we say when there's no number? It is 0. We think of this as 2x plus 0. There's no number by itself. You can say, well, then that's really kind of like saying plus 0. So 0 would be the y-intercept. Is the slope positive or negative?
Positive.
Positive. Yeah, you just look at the number in front of the x as a positive or negative number. So I guess for the people on the recording, I have some. Oh, I guess I could put them up here now. Just for the recording. So here's what I have written up on the board. I'll just start a whole new one. So we have these equations. Somebody read them off to me if you would, please. Y equals 2x is one of them.
Y equals 4 minus 8.
Yeah, I know so many people doing it. That was a bad idea.
Y equals x plus 2. And then y equals negative 1 over 2x minus 1.
All right. So we just said in the first problem, this is really just for the recording, but for you guys too. In the first problem, y-intercept, well, the y-intercept is always the number by itself, but we don't see a number by itself because 2 is not by itself. 2 is in front of the x. We don't see a number by itself. It's really like having plus 0, which means 0 is the y-intercept. And then we said this. Oh, and what you're supposed to be doing is we're saying 2 things. What's the y-intercept, and is the slope positive or negative? So the y-intercept is 0, and we say the slope in this one, which is 2, is positive. If you can do that much right there, and hopefully you can do a little more, but if you can do at least that, you should be able to pass probably the graphing section, because there's some multiple choice where we're going to use just that information, not even knowing how to graph it. You can do that, should be in, well, hopefully you should be okay. All right, next one. What is the y-intercept on the next one? Y equals 4 subtract 3x. What is it? 4. Sure? Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
It is. It's 4. So, again, the number all by itself, in this case, is the first number, which it sometimes is the first number, sometimes it's the second number. So you can't just rely on where it is. What's the slope, positive or negative? Yeah, the number is the 3, because it's in front of the x, and you have to include the sign in front of that number. So there's a negative slope in this one. All right. What about y equals x plus 2? What's the y-intercept? 2, right? The number all by itself. And whatever sign is in front of that number, which in this case is positive. Positive 2. And then is the slope positive or negative?
Positive.
Positive, because technically we would say there's a 1 in front of the x, that's the slope, so the slope is 1, and there's no negative sign in front of the x, so it's got to be positive. So positive slope, and then last one, what's the y-intercept? Negative 1 is all by itself. Make sure you include that negative. So when you put a point on the graph, it should be on the negative 1. So y-intercept, and I'm going to actually do that in a second. Negative 1, what's the slope? Positive or negative? It is negative. There's a negative sign in front of the slope, so it's negative. Again, that's not rocket science. I mean, it really shouldn't be that difficult if you're truly trying right now. I think almost everybody is saying the right answers. Like I said, that'll probably get you through the graphing section. You need to do a little bit more with that information. That's not what the question is going to be. But if you can do that, the next step shouldn't be that bad. Now I got to find, I think it's way back in the front. Dun, dun, dun. There we go. All right, so, oh no. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. What is that from? What show is that from? It's either The Simpsons or something where there's a character that says that.
It says, oh no.
Yeah. I know it's an animated show and I can picture what the guy looks like. I can't remember. Is that not where you got it from? From a show? Oh, you don't know where you got it from? Did you just, who just said it like that? Somebody just said it like that.
That was me.
But you didn't get that from a show?
No.
Oh, all right. Never mind then.
British accent.
He just says random stuff like that. All right, so here's what you're going to do on the exit ticket. I'm sorry, on the quiz. Well, this is one way to do it. There's another way to do it, which is graphing. But if you don't know how to graph, and I graded your exit tickets, and a lot of us don't, you need to come up with a shortcut, or not shortcut, but you need to come up with a way to get some partial points, some partial credit. And I'm going to give you one of those ways. If you see a graph already with lines on it, I'm not actually doing any graphing. We're just focusing on how to, because there are some problems, remember, on the graphing exit ticket where I gave you two equations and then I gave you a bunch of graphs and you had to pick the right graph. We didn't do great on that. And the problem with that is there's no partial credit. Like I can't give you credit for just being able to put the Y-intercept in the right spot. If you pick the wrong graph, it is wrong. You lose all the points. So we got to do better on those. Even if you at least get one of them. A lot of people miss both of them. So we're going to talk about how to kind of figure it out, even if we don't know how to graph. For both of these lines, we got a red and a blue. I know a couple pretty important things that might help me match it up with the correct equation. What do I know for the blue line? What's negative? What's negative? That's one of them. What is it? What's negative though about that blue line? What is it that's negative? When it goes down, you're right, but what is it? What is negative? You've got to know that part. Slope is negative. So we know without even doing anything with numbers at all, and most of what I'm teaching you is not doing anything with numbers right now, because I know we're struggling with the numbers part, the rise and the run mainly. I know if I'm on this blue line, and if I'm walking the blue line, I'm walking down. And you always start on the left side of a line. Very good artist. I don't know if you're in here when I used my artist skills. Fabulous artist. So if I am walking to the right, I am walking down. That means negative slope. Always. No exceptions. Negative slope for the blue line. What else do I know about that blue line? Who am I going to call? Daniel. What else do I know about that blue line? Super important. It has to do with what we did over there. What was the other thing we talked about over there besides slope? Well, no, what did we talk about? There were two things you had to do. One of them had to do with slope. What was the other one? First thing. So what do we know about the Y-intercept on that blue line? It's 4. So again, if you didn't automatically know that answer, here's where you write a note. The Y-intercept for a line, in this case we're talking about the blue line, is where the line crosses the Y-axis, or the vertical number line. Right there. That's the Y-intercept visually. So I know it's got a negative slope, and I know the Y-intercept is positive 4 for that line. So if I have a bunch of graphs, I can look for the graph that has a positive Y-intercept, or a positive 4 for the Y-intercept, which we did number all alone. And then I could match up in that equation with the slope number and make sure that number is negative. Even if I can't do that whole rise and run part, I guarantee you doing this process will eliminate at least half the graphs, and I don't just mean on my stuff, I mean next year, whenever you have to take the big quizzes, the big tests, it will eliminate a bunch of the answers. Now let's do that same thing. So for the red line, is the slope positive or negative? What is it? Slope is positive, right? So now, again, I start over here. Now I'm walking up the line. Well, if you're walking up the line, that means a positive slope. And then the next thing we want to know is y-intercept, which is actually not 1.
Negative.
Negative. You've got to remember the negative part, because when you go to look at the equation, there probably will be an equation that has a positive 1 in it, because they're trying to get you to make that mistake. So you've got to understand that the y-intercept is a negative number in this, -1. Hopefully you can see that. Now you'd go to the graphs and you'd just try to match stuff up. Okay, which graph has a positive 4 and a negative slope? Even if you don't know anything about the actual number, you know it needs to be negative. Which graph has a -1 y-intercept and a positive slope? And that's going to eliminate a whole bunch of graphs, guaranteed. So we're actually going to kind of do that process now. So here, can you guys see that in the back? So Luna, Jeremy, can you see the equation? You see it all right? All right, so let's look at each graph. We're going to do the same thing we just did. We'll do one in red, one in, actually we'll do, okay, well, I'll zoom in a little bit though. We'll just do 2 graphs at a time. So for the red line, I'm going to call names on this. Not this class. Oh, 4th period. Wait, that's 5th period. 4th period. Oh, Azar, 1st person. Oh, he left. Okay, he didn't come back. Well, the couple of them came back, but he wasn't. Let's try again. Damani, head down. I was going to call on you anyway. So, Damani, for the red line, this red line, what's y-intercept? Well, then I'd be paying attention.
Wait, I can't see it's blurry. I don't know.
Okay, so great point. If you get a graph that is tough to see the numbers, I told you this before, you need to remember this because I guarantee you, you are going to get some district and state tests. I try, even on some of mine, where you can't read the numbers great. You have to understand this point right there. Correct. This point is 0, 0. X is 0, Y is 0. So if you're trying to find what the y-intercept number is, start at 0 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can't read the numbers. Or if it crossed down here, you would go -1, -2, -3, -4. Here, that's the wrong answer, but if you thought it was that, 1, 2, -1, -2, -3, +1. So start at 0, 0 and count. Don't just try to figure out the number because a bunch of people messed that up on one of the quizzes. So we know for the red line, y-intercept is +6, right? What do you think about that? Just want to see if anybody has an epiphany. I love that
No,
one.
that's right. Wait, no, wait. Huh? Oh, wait, it's wrong.
No, it's right.
Wait, hold on.
You're overthinking it.
What is it wrong?
Show it.
Never mind. I'm too tired.
It is right. What I'm asking you really has to do with the equations now. Look at the equation.
Okay. Oh.
Can't do.
Oh. I see.
Do you see a +6 for a y-intercept
No.
anywhere?
No.
Then that ain't the right graph. If you have a +6 y-intercept, one of these would have to have a +6 because they got to match up. This line has to be one of those 2 equations. Well, that's a y-intercept of +1. That's a y-intercept of -3. Now this line has a +1, but this line should be going through -3 down there, and it doesn't. If you'll notice though, oh, we'll come back to that one. You know what the trick is on this one? It went through -3 on the x-axis.
That's what I thought.
So that's what they're trying to trick you up on is they want, and you'll notice this one went through +1 on the x-axis. So they're trying to fool you into thinking that these 2 numbers are supposed to be on the x-axis, which they're not. That's why you have to understand they go on the y-axis. Because that's one of the tricks they're going to put in there. Right, isn't he? Nice shoes, by the way.
That's the Y-intercept, correct?
So it is the y-intercept, so it goes on the y-axis. So that's why I say a lot of times you're just going to eliminate stuff immediately because the tricks that they use, if you understand how to do it, that's not going to match up at all immediately on some of them. Some of them it'll match up all the way to the end, and then you'll have to either guess or figure out the last step. Actually, I don't need to erase that. So now we can move to the next graph. Next graph, y-intercept. What's the y-intercept for the red line? Oh, shoot, I meant to call somebody. Okay, we already said the answer. Red line, y-intercept, -3, right?
I was right.
Yep, that's where it crosses. Crosses right there. So -3 is the y-intercept. Now I'm going to call it. Since I forgot to do that. And I'm telling you, this is the way you do multiple choice tests. If you want to graduate high school, you need to understand how to take a test. And that's really all I'm teaching you right now. If you get every question down to 2 choices or even sometimes 3, but definitely 2, you can probably pass those tests, even if you don't know how to actually do the math. But you know how to eliminate some of the options because they don't make sense. Yes.
So I'm getting it right.
The -3 was right, yeah. That person is not here today. Oh, that one needs to go back in. This person, Aiden B. All right, wakey wakey. So, Aiden B, tell me something about either the blue line. I already told you on the red line, the y-intercept is -3. Tell me something about either the blue line or the red line. Related to the slope or the y-intercept. All right, so y-intercept to the blue line is 1, +1. All right, so y-intercept, +1. So right now, let's look and just say, okay, is this a possible correct graph? Do we have a y-intercept in the equations of -3 and +1?
Yeah, correct.
We do, so we got to keep going. We're not done. We can't say that's eliminated yet. It might be the right graph. So what else can you tell me? Oh, we got him. Draw. Ah! Oh no, this one's taken. Gosh. This is A and B again. So now you gotta tell me something else, and you can get drawn again. So what is something else you can tell me, red or blue line? As do what we did over there. There's what I wanted. So now everybody pay back attention if you just tuned out. This is important. We said blue line has a negative slope, right? So what's true about the blue line or the equation for the blue line? The 2 things.
The slope for blue is positive and the slope for red is negative.
Well, just about the blue.
Oh, just
Actually, the slope for blue is negative.
Oh, okay.
So just about, what do we know? We know 2 things about the blue line. What do we know, Izzy?
It's rising.
Well, which means, no, the blue line's not.
Oh, it's going down.
The blue line, remember, you always start on the left. So if I'm walking, I'm going down that line, right? I'd be going down to the right. So what do we know about the blue line? 2 things.
It's decreasing.
So what, they're written right there. That means what?
The slope is negative.
So we know the slope number better be negative in the equation, and we know the y-intercept better be 1. So this is the one with the y-intercept of 1. What's the slope?
Slope for 1.
Hmm?
The slope is.
No, there's a slope there. +1, right? So is it a negative slope?
No.
Didn't it need to be a negative slope here, we said?
It needs to be negative. Yeah.
So that ain't the right graph. That cannot be the right graph because if we have the equation where the y-intercept is +1, the slope has to be negative to match up with that line. So it can't be. Well, we got 2 more below that. We're going to do the same thing. So we can eliminate that. We didn't even really get to the point where we even did the second thing on the red line. Certainly didn't try to do rise over run yet. We've already eliminated 2 graphs. We're down to 2. Now we get down here, and I'm going to do these really fast. I mean, you guys can help out, but what do we know about the red line? Positive slope, right? Goes up I draw my little guy down here. He's walking up. That means positive slope. What else do we know about it? Since I have red in my hand. What else do we know about it? I think somebody just said it. Y-intercept is 1, right? Positive 1. All right. So what do we know about the blue line? Negative. I don't know if this is going to work. Negative slope, right? Yeah, I didn't think that was going to work. Well, there's actually a way you can do it and use, there's dual pin mode. I don't know how it figures it out, but I don't know how to change it to that. Negative slope, we said. And then what else do we know about the blue line?
-3.
Y-intercept. So if you can just figure these two things out. Problem is, in this case, we know the same exact things about this. It's a negative slope here, negative slope, and a -3. And then the blue one is positive 1 y-intercept and a positive slope. So we know actually the same things. There's no difference between those. So now we either have to try to take the next step and figure out more information, or we just have to make a guess between those two, which is a lot better than guessing between 4, if you can eliminate a couple of them. The way you would actually figure out the answer, you'd have to figure out what is the number for the slope. Well, that's when you do rise and run stuff. So run for the red is 1 up 2. So the positive slope for red is actually a 2, because I went right 1 up 2, which is probably all I need to know. I'll bet I don't. So for the 1, the slope should have been 2, which is not correct. So that's not the right one. Oh, wait, actually, hold on. Yeah, no. Yeah. So that now well, just to check it, we'll do this. So the slope should be over 1 up 1. So that's a slope of positive 1. So when the y-intercept is 1, the slope should be 1. Y-intercept is 1, slope is 1. Go. Wait, was somebody waiting? Was I holding somebody? All right, so that's an example of how to at least eliminate. Because I will tell you, I think it's even easier on the ones I give you on the quiz. You might be able to get it all the way down to the correct answer just by knowing that. Or you might have to guess between a couple of them, I don't know. Or do the last step where you do rise and run to figure out what the slope was. But regardless, nobody should be picking the one where it doesn't even match the y-intercept, or where the slope is negative on the graph, but it's positive in the equation. Like, at least don't pick the ones that are definitely not the right answer. All right, so here's the next thing we're doing. You should all have grabbed one of these. We're going to practice doing some more substitution. I'm going to show you one more time what you do, because I was seeing a lot of mistakes that I just frankly don't understand why we're still making them. Yes. Not right now, but I'll write you a pass when I get through with this. If you again, this is your, I don't think, were you here for the big quiz last quarter? The big 100-point quiz? Well, as you know, then they're typically pretty low grade, so this is your review for it. All right, we already went over how to do slope and y-intercept. So slope is the 2, slope is the -4, y-intercept is the -1 and the -7. Make sure you include the negative with the number anytime, like negative with the 4, negative with the 7, negative with the 1. That's a very common mistake, and it's one that we just shouldn't really be making anymore. Oh no, here it is. Gosh, dang it, that's not it. Hold on. I think I might have put it all the way at the end. I got a whole bunch of those graphs I should use. Oh no, actually I don't think I do. Oh no, that's what I did. There we go. All right. God dang it. I don't really want to go back through and do all of that. All right, here we'll practice. We'll just practice using your sheet then. All right, that's fine. I'm not going to go back and redo all of that. All right, so on your sheet, here's what you're going to do. Now, you don't have a, oh, tell you what. Get out your other sheet too from the other day if you have it. You might want to do some of this on the old sheet. It has more options. I may write up a couple new ones also, but I'm just going to review what you should be doing using these problems up here that are already done, but hopefully if it's not clear, just let me know. All right, heads up if you care about the quiz. Heads up. All right. So with substitution, I'm going to try to give you a process, which I've given you before. It's not that much different, but I'm going to try something a little different. Oh, man. I really feel like I need to write all of these over again. All right, I'm not going to. I may do a couple more. So when you have the two equations, you're going to have a bunch of different types of equations. Here, y is by itself, y is in the middle. And when y is by itself, there's only a number there. Here, both y's are by themselves. Here you have just one term. Here you have two terms. Again, here y is all by itself in both. And in both of them, you have two terms. Down here, y is all by itself. But you have a term with an x as opposed to here you just had a number. And then down here, you just had y in the middle. And again, y is by itself. Y is not by itself. Bunch of different possible ways it can look. I'm telling you right now, it doesn't matter how it looks. It's the same first step every time. I do not know why a bunch of people got confused on the quiz when I gave you one that instead of having two terms in it, it only had one term. It's the same thing. It's just when you go to write, like replace the variable in the other equation, instead of writing two things, you write one thing. So here's what you do. Actually, you know what? I can kind of do this over like this. So that's the equation right there, right? You put a box. So I want you to do this on a couple of them on your sheet right now. 1 and 2, doesn't matter. 2 and 4, 3, one of the first few. Put a box around, so find the variable all by itself. One equation, every time I give it to you, will have a variable by itself. Maybe both of them. If they both do, then you're going to put a box around both. On the other side of the equal sign, you need to put a box around everything. So starting from the end of the equal sign, put a box around everything to the right. If it's just one number, put a box around that one number. If it's two different terms, put a box around both terms. Only for the ones where the variable is all by itself, though. I did not box anything here. I didn't put a box around anything here. I didn't put a box around anything there. So if you see the variable all by itself, put a box around it. Or put a box around what's on the other side of the equal sign. Now, that's your first step. Everybody, I don't know that I'll give points for that because that has nothing to do with math, but I might. If you actually completely bomb it, but you do that, I might give you something. Now, here's your next step. You have the other equation, right? The equation with no boxes. And I'm going to focus on this one first, and I'll come back to the one where you have two boxes. You're going to erase the y. You need to get rid of it and rewrite the whole equation without the y in it. Everything else, plus 2 equals 10. It's not a very good 10, but you might need to leave more space here because you're going to write something there from the box, basically. But this one, I didn't need a lot of space because it's just one number. Now, your last step, so 3-step process. Put a box around it, write the other equation without the y, and on mine, it will always be y. This could apply to x if this would have been x all alone. You won't have to worry about that on mine. Erase the y instead of, or in that gap where the y was. Whatever's in that box, you put that. So in this case, and you put parentheses. Because parentheses mean multiplication. That's truly what you're doing. You're multiplying. This is 2 times y, which means you got to make sure this is 2 times -4. And parentheses mean multiplication when they're right next to a number or a variable like that. That means 2 times -4, just like this means 2 times y. Even if you don't understand it, if you do that, you get some points. Quite a few points, actually. Any questions on that? Did you not get that? All right. Explain.
I didn't get the whole.
Start at the beginning. Explain the steps, and then wherever you can't. Well, you better be able to do the first step. What's the first step?
Get rid of the
So, well, the very first step was the very first thing I did. I mean, it was already done, but
box, the 4.
you look at where the variable is all alone. You should be doing this with me. So do it so that you go through this. No, not on that. That's the graphing. There you go, that one. So find in the first equation. I don't have a copy of it. In the first equation, one of the equations, maybe both, but at least one of them will have a variable all by itself. Do you see that equation?
Yeah.
So now, on the side, so basically after the equal sign, you're going to put a box around everything to the right of the equal sign. Everything. So literally, just to the right of the equal sign, you put a box around everything on the right side. And I did it multiple times, so you can kind of see what it looks like every time. I don't box just one of these. Some people are boxing just one of these. Everything on the other side has the box around. If there was 20 things on the other side, I'd box all 20, which you won't ever see. But. Now, next step. So you got the box, right? You're good with that. So now we have the second equation, right? You see there's another equation in that problem. So we're going to write that equation, but without whatever variable is here, which I'll just tell you, it's always going to be y for this class. Whatever variable we have up here next to the box, we're going to get rid of that variable, and we're going to rewrite everything else. So 3x plus 2. I'm not going to write the y. A lot of people are still trying to leave that in. We do not write that. Equals 10. And this is a separate problem over here. So if that's confusing you, that's a whole nother problem we'll do in a minute. So all I did is I got rid of the y, right? Just erase the y, basically. Well, now you're going to come back in where that gap is, where y was. Whatever's in the box, you're just going to write that in parentheses. -4. I switched my color. That's it. That will get you 30% credit on one like this. On these, though, when we do these, that'll get you 50% credit. That's what I gave on the last exercise, just for doing that. Explain it to Tejan.
I mean, I got like most of it.
Explain what you just did to him. The three steps. 3 steps.
I got rid of y, but I didn't find it. This makes sense.
Where I'm going to do, if you're confused, I'm going to do one that it does make sense. It can be, I said, whatever's in the box. I don't care how many things. Here, I'll do one more like number 1 then, if that's the one you guys are doing. All right, so let's look at this one down here.
So what are we doing? You're doing one like 5.
I'm doing one like 1 right now, if that's the one all of you are starting with. I should have said match it up with the one that has y all just a single number, but. All right, so now, still the same first step. What's the first step? Find the variable by itself, and to the right of that equal sign, everything to the right of that equal sign needs to be in a rectangle, the box. So you did that. Did you do that? Okay. Now we have a second equation, right? And it doesn't matter if there's subtraction sign. Now that'll matter when we do the math. But for the first step, does not matter what that equation looks like. The second equation. You're going to just write that whole equation out. 5x plus 4, but you're going to leave out the y. You're going to leave a big space where the y should be, but you're not going to write the y. I left a big space where that y was. And now whatever's in that box up there, we're going to replace basically where the gap is, where we didn't write y. We're going to put in parentheses. That, oh, man. There. 3x plus 7. I'd leave a bigger gap because, as you can see, if you don't, you have to try to cram that in. I guess I can zoom in, though, for you guys.
Oh, that was confusing. That was easy.
There.
Exactly.
So all I did is I got rid of the y and I replaced it with what's in that box.
I mean, I get it.
Bam.
Because I'm thinking, okay, now I'm confused because you said,
That is.
Well, that's when we solve. Well, no. You put a box, you look at the variable by itself, and you put a box around that for your first step. We're not, like, is that what you're saying? Is you're talking about the very first step?
I'm thinking like, okay.
Because solving, getting the variable by itself, solving would be what we would now do here. We'd try to get this x by itself. And we'd solve, but that's different from the replacement. First, we got to replace the variable. Let me see what you mean. I want you to go through and try to do that on a couple of other problems. So try to do that replacement step on some of the problems. I'm going to walk around and look.
Oh, so if it's.
Yeah, try to do that on a couple of them.
No,
Yeah, let me look.
It's not about what I'm doing, it's what you're doing.
Okay, so this is not what I'm saying to do. So erase that.
Pause.
Doesn't even say anything.
It needs to look exactly like mine looks. And I'm going to walk you through the steps.
So you want us to do this on a piece of paper or something? He said, get the thing.
I mean, it's easy on other equations, but there's some that just.
Alright, so find the variable that's all alone. You have two equations. Which one has a variable all by itself?
Five.
Look at it.
No.
I
Everyone
was just
does.
nosy as hell.
I'm saying in this problem, which equations, you got two equations, right, top one and the bottom one.
The big
Which
one.
one of those equations has a variable for y is all by itself? They don't always be y.
What? What about the substitution? Oh, that's zero.
The top one.
And when I say all by itself, I mean on one side of the equation.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, it has to on one of the sides, be like, here, there's not a variable all by itself on this side. I don't mean all by, like, just one variable. I mean on one of the sides, it's all by itself. So on either the left, and it'll almost always be the left side, that's all alone on the left side, right? That's all alone on the left side. Can't go anywhere. That's all alone on the left side, right? So it just is all alone on one side of the equation. There's going to still be some stuff on the other side of the equation. Does that make sense? All right, so which one of your equations has that? Top one or the bottom one? For that first problem.
The top one.
Top one, right? Y is all by itself on the left. So now that you've identified the correct equation, so if you need to listen, you can kind of listen. But I want you to then plug this in for yourself. An example of that. So now in that equation, so in that equation, what you do is on the right side of the equal sign, so not on the side where the y is, you're going to put a box around everything over there. If it's only one term, you'd put a box around one term. If it's two terms, so something with an x and a number, you put a box around that whole thing. Everything on the right side should be in the box. What?
Basically making a multi-step equation, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's distributive problems. It's not really, well, I guess it is multi-step, it's more than two, so it has to be multi-step, but yeah, because you do distributive. So do that. Put a box around everything on the right side. Well, I've been doing that. You know what really helps you?
I couldn't understand what he's talking about. You're gonna tell me what?
Because when you're away, you're fine. Wow, that's how you write it down. You put a box around everything on the right side. So that's your first step. Well, first step technically is to identify which equation you have a variable on that side. So here's your next step. So I'm going back through this again. I'll come around and check. Let me go through this real quick with Damani. And I still got to write a pass for Camila. So now you have a second equation, right? You have an equation below that equation.
Yeah, I already did that. I already did all that.
Oh, well, if you did that, yeah, then you're fine.
But I'm saying like, okay,
All right,
so just did
I'm
that.
calling
I'm
for
thinking,
it.
you
Yeah,
said the
hell.
variable all by itself. That to me is not by itself.
This shit good.
Well, yeah, but that's not the one we're looking. We're looking for the variable all by itself, which is y. And here's the y. In every one of these problems, well, actually not on this page, but I won't give you one. And that's why I changed these. You'll notice there's no variable all by itself over here, right? In either equation. You see that? There's no variable by itself here. That's why I changed this equation to make it a variable by itself. I'm not going to give you one of the variables. Not. So every time I give you a problem in one of the equations, or maybe even both, you're going to have a y all by itself in one of the equations. So you just go to that equation, you take what's on the right side, put a box around it, and then you plug it in and place the box. So yeah, you know what you're doing right there. Do that. So show me though on that one. Do that one. Just make sure you're good. Did you want me to look at one? Let me get passes for.
Mr. Gill, you got Twitter?
I don't even know. I don't use it for sure. I think I do have an account that I had when it first came out a long time ago, but I never go on. I don't even know what my login is. I'm assuming it's the same login I have for something else probably.
Twitter's born, right?
I've not used the Twitter account in who knows how. I have MySpace.
First, like in 2004. Oh God, that's like.
Yeah, that was 2004. And before, I mean, it was before then.
It was 2004?
Before then, even.
17 years ago.
I think that was like 2000, maybe even before 2000. Let's see today. 10:05. Again, you should be doing the first step on as many as you can get done. There's no sense in just sitting there doing nothing. Just because I'm doing something else. Yeah, just put a box around it, rewrite the other equation without the y, and then wherever that gap is where the y was, replace it with what's in the box. That even works for these where you have y in both. If I rewrite one, like I'd have to pick one because they're both alone, but I could rewrite this equation without the y, take what's in that box and put it there. Or I could rewrite this equation without the y, take what's in that box and put it there. But I'm going to go over how to do those specifically in a second. But yeah, don't sit there and do nothing just because I'm checking papers. I mean, you should be able to do all of these the first step. And that's 50% credit on some of the more difficult ones. And then you'd have to do the math, which I'm going to only do the math on probably one example in a second. And I'll probably use one of the ones on your paper. All right, so any question? Oh, I need to check it for you. Good. That looks good. And we'll go over how to do. Yeah, well, you'd be using this. So
what in the world?
I went ahead and converted one of the equations for you to be an equation with a variable.
Randomized hair time.
It might be up on the desk. We'll look up there real quick. Make sure you're including negatives. But yeah, that's all.
Who's hair tie?
Mine.
Why do you have a hair tie?
I have long hair, oh boy.
What did I do with John's paper?
So you just magically put it on today.
Huh, I don't know.
Why did you put them on?
Oh,
You want to see hair ties on.
Yeah, but I don't.
all right, so let's move on. So now let's talk about these. I'm going to give you, what we just went over works for these. All right, so if you understand that, if you're good, the only difference here is we have two equations in two boxes, two variables that are by themselves. Gentlemen, so again, it's the same concept. I could write, so if I'm thinking this is the equation where y is all by itself, I'd rewrite this. I wouldn't write the y, and then I'd take what's in that box and put it where y was. Or here's this short version. We did this before. Some of you wrote it down and still didn't know how to do it. Some of you didn't write it down. If, I made you write this, if y is alone in both equations. So again, I would write this down. If y is alone in both equations. You do the same thing we just did, only now you'll put a box around both right sides of the equation, or whatever you would call. I would say the right side of the equation. Put a box around both things that are on the right side. So you have two boxes in this because you have two variables all by themselves. Now you just take what's in the boxes and you put an equal sign between them. This was in that box, negative 3x. This was in that box, and I got an equal sign between them. So again, I don't care how you get it done, but the end result is these two things need to be on the left. One needs to be on the left, one needs to be on the right. And then if you want to look at another example, I'll zoom out because the one to the right is the exact same. Again, y was all by itself, so I put a box around both equations on the right. And I just made those two things, the left and right side, and I put an equal sign between them. That's 50% right there, just setting it up. Now from there, you've got to know how to solve it out. And I'll just walk around and work with you on that because that's solving an equation. I can't redo the whole solving an equation lesson. But you should know how to do some things. Like if you have this right here or this right here, I need to get the variables, get rid of them on the right. So here I need to get rid of the negative 2x. Here I need to get rid of the positive 2x. So my first step over here would be the opposite, to cancel them out, plus 2x. My first step over here would be, again, the opposite, but if that's positive, then that would have to be subtract 2x. And then if I do that on one side, I got to do it on the other side. Same thing over here. If I do that on one side, I got to do that on the other side. So that should get you to a two-step equation, and hopefully you can do a two-step equation. And again, there are two-step equations on the big quiz. All right, so go ahead, try to set them all up, try to do the math from there, and I'm just going to walk around and check and help.
Y, so that was meant by.
Oh.
That's funny.
No, you can't do that. You can't make y all by itself on its own. No. That's only when y is already by itself. You can't make y all by itself. And if the equation y isn't by itself, you can't make it.
So then what do you do?
Huh?
Not that one, saying if there was a Y front that wasn't to be.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, did we not have a bunch of them on here? Oh, you're right, we don't. I see what you're saying now. The other worksheet has a whole bunch of them with y all by itself. So Tejan just brought up a good point. This worksheet doesn't really have any where y is all by itself in both. So that's the other worksheet had a whole bunch of them. Like the first 10 or 11 problems, y was by itself in every equation. So if you want to use the other worksheet to practice this a little bit, then you can do that. This worksheet is going to be better for practicing the ones like this here, where you have one equation with a whole bunch of stuff and then one where the variable's by itself. That's probably better. This worksheet's better for those. But the other worksheet has way more problems. I mean, it has every type up here. So if you want to use that other worksheet to practice the other types, I can do that. If you don't have it, I might have a few of them up there, but you got 30 minutes to practice. So you need to take advantage of this time.
What, we got an exit ticket?
No, you have a quiz
Right
on
now?
Thursday.
Oh, okay, that makes
Thursday.
sense.
But again, the quiz is going to be pretty much the whole period. You're not going to have any practice. We might do, probably all I'll do is solve a couple of two-step equations. Just make sure we're good on those. And by then you'll need probably an hour and 20 minutes at least, I would say, to do the big quiz. Wow. So I would practice today.
God, I love math.
Yes, me too. Well, I'm not sure you were being sincere.
What?
All right. I did do the math on this. Oh, don't forget, a lot of people lost points on the exit tickets. You've got to solve for both variables. If you go through and you solve for the x, the first variable, you've got to then solve for the second variable. So I did that right here. I went through and I solved for x, and I came up with x equals negative 15 over 17. You'll get integers. Don't worry about getting fractions. You will get integers. But then, once I solve for x, I have to say, okay, well, I need to solve for y. So I took this whole equation where y equals all of this stuff, and now I replaced the x, which is why there's a box around that. I put a box around this. I took out the x, so there's no x, and I replaced it with what's in the blue box. If you can just show me that you know to replace it, then even if you get the math wrong, that's pretty much full credit for the second variable.
But this stuff did not be on the test.
Oh, it's on the test. Same thing we've been doing for 2 weeks. Again, you can't learn this stuff in one day. When you take days off, you're not gonna learn. You've got to try to do this stuff every day we do it. We've been doing this since last Monday. So this is now our 4th lesson at least on it. So. Like those of you that are acting like this is the first time you've ever seen it, we've been doing this for 5 classes now. 5th class. So some of you didn't put much effort into it in the other classes. Some of you slept through the other classes.
I'm gonna give you something new every day too.
Yeah, so that means multiplication, 3 times that. So what's negative 3? Then that would be negative 3 times
I've never
negative
seen
2.
it like that. I'm not gonna lie.
I think, yes, yeah, pass it in there. You need to practice it more in there. And that needs to say, all right. Why is that not working? Oh, is that you? I guess I'm done. I can stop the recording.
That was my dog.
So easy.
Was it better than Mr. Gill's?
No way.
So I hope-
Probably